Hi, I'm Marin Still, and today, someone I know found out their partner had been seeing someone else for 8 months. Not a one-time mistake, 8 months. A whole parallel relationship running quietly in the background while the first one continued as if nothing was wrong. And the thing that broke my friend wasn't the betrayal itself. It was this one question that would not go away. Was any of it even real? The dinners, the fights, the making up after the fights, the feeling of being chosen. Was any of that actually true if it was happening alongside something else? That question is one of the most painful things a human being can feel. And it is also, as it turns out, one of the most ancient. And before there were wedding rings, before there were marriage certificates, before there were divorce lawyers, before there were even words for any of this, your ancestors were already dealing with exactly this problem. In exactly the same way, with slightly more violence and considerably less paperwork. Because here is what nobody tells you about prehistoric love. It was not simple. It was not pure. It was not one person finding their person and staying forever in a cave, together making spear points and gazing at the moon. The emotional architecture of human pair bonding, jealousy, attachment, the pain of being replaced, the desire for more than one connection, all of it existed long before any institution tried to regulate it. And some of what your ancestors did about it will make your jaw drop. Stay with me, it gets weirder. Let's start with the basic question. Did prehistoric humans even have the concept of a committed partner? The anthropologist Helen Fisher at Rutgers University has spent decades studying pair bonding across human cultures and across evolutionary history. What she found is that the drive to form a primary attachment with one specific person is not a cultural invention. It is biological. Brain scans of people in the early stages of romantic attachment show activation in the same dopamine reward pathways that fire during addiction. Wanting a specific person, not just any person, a particular person, is something the human brain does automatically, across every culture ever studied. But here is where it immediately gets complicated. Because Fisher also found that humans are what she calls serial monogamists in their natural state. Not lifelong monogamists, serial ones. The biological tendency is to form a strong pair bond, maintain it for roughly 3 to 4 years, long enough to conceive and get a child through its most vulnerable period, and then, in a significant number of cases, feel the pull towards something new. 3 to 4 years. That is the natural human relationship arc before the institution stepped in and said, no, actually, forever. So what happened in those prehistoric 3 to 4 years? The archaeologist Christopher Ryan, who spent years researching human mating patterns for his controversial but widely cited book, Sex at Dawn, argues that for most of human prehistory, before agriculture, before property, before the concept of inheritance, exclusive pair bonding was the exception rather than the norm. Small bands of related individuals lived together, raised children collectively, and formed emotional attachments that were fluid and overlapping rather than strictly binary. But the genetic evidence tells a more nuanced story. A landmark 2019 study published in Science analyzing ancient DNA from burial sites across Bronze Age Europe found consistent evidence of nuclear family units. One adult male, one adult female, children biologically related to both. These people were buried together. They were, by every available measure, recognized as a unit, which means the concept of a primary pair bond with social recognition was real and present in prehistoric communities. The one-person idea was not invented by the church. It was older than that. Which means the tension between the biological pull toward novelty and the social reality of a recognized partner was also older than that. Which means jealousy was also older than that. And here is where the archaeology gets genuinely fascinating. Because jealousy leaves traces, not in the form of diary entries or court records, but in bones. Researchers studying skeletal remains from prehistoric and early historical sites have consistently found evidence of interpersonal violence concentrated in specific demographic patterns. Work by the physical anthropologist David Dye at the University of Memphis, examining sites across the American Midwest, dating back 4,000 years, found that a disproportionate amount of lethal violence between adults occurred between males of similar age and status. Exactly the demographic you would predict if competition over partners was a significant driver of conflict. In plain English, people were getting hit over the head, and the patterns of who was hitting whom suggest that the reasons were often the same reasons people get hit over the head today. The primatologist Franz de Waal at Emory University, who has spent decades studying the emotional lives of our closest primate relatives, documented something that every anthropologist recognizes instantly. Jealousy in bonobos and chimpanzees, our two closest living relatives, is not just a behavioral response. It is a full emotional system with physical symptoms, social consequences, and strategic responses. The biology of jealousy, the feeling of wanting to protect a specific bond from a specific threat, is something we inherited. It did not arrive with civilization. It was already there. So what did prehistoric communities actually do when someone started paying attention to another person's partner? The answer depends on the community, the time period, and the available evidence. But what researchers have found across multiple cultures and multiple eras is a remarkably consistent set of responses. The first was social pressure. In small bands where everyone knew everyone and survival depended on group cohesion, a member who destabilized pair bonds was a threat to the whole group. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy at UC Davis, who has written extensively on cooperative breeding in human prehistory, argues that small-scale prehistoric communities had strong social incentives to police relationship boundaries, not for moral reasons, but for practical ones. A community full of jealousy and conflict was a community that hunted badly, shared poorly, and died faster. The group had skin in the game. What that social pressure looked like in practice varied enormously. In some documented hunter-gatherer communities studied in the 20th century, a partner who strayed was confronted publicly by the group. In others, the confrontation was physical and immediate, handled between the individuals involved, often with whatever was nearby, which in a prehistoric camp was frequently a stick, a bone, or a stone tool. In others still, the community simply reorganized. The pair bond dissolved, new configurations emerged, life continued. What almost never happened, because the institution did not exist, was a formal process. No courts, no lawyers, no documents, no one deciding who was right. The resolution was social and immediate, and sometimes violent, and then it was over, and everyone still had to share a camp and a fire and a hunting territory. The evolutionary psychologist David Buss at the University of Texas has studied jealousy across 37 cultures and found something that cuts directly to the heart of this. The specific triggers of jealousy, what makes humans most distressed about a partner's outside connection, differ predictably between individuals in ways that map onto biological reproductive concerns. But the capacity for jealousy itself, the pain of it, the behavioral responses it triggers, the social disruption it causes, is universal. Every culture studied, every recorded time period, always present. Which means your ancestors were not free of this. They were not floating in some pre-institutional paradise of open hearts and easy love. They had the same wiring you have. They felt the same things you feel. They just resolved it differently because the resolution systems we have built, the paperwork, the lawyers, the social scripts, the therapy, none of those existed yet. What they had instead was the group, the fire, the immediate confrontation. And then tomorrow, because tomorrow there was still hunting to do and children to feed and a world that did not pause for anyone's broken heart. So here is the modern slap, because I want you to think about the last time you felt that particular feeling. The one where you saw a message you were not supposed to see, or noticed something small that did not add up, or had a thought you could not unthink. That specific, awful, stomach-dropping feeling. That feeling is not a modern weakness. That is not you being insecure, or needy, or not evolved enough to handle complexity. That is your prehistoric nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do, protecting a bond that your brain has decided matters, running the same program that kept your ancestors alive, in a world where losing a primary partner had consequences that extended far beyond feelings. The difference is that your ancestors resolved it the same day, with a stick, or a confrontation, or a reorganization, and then it was done. We have built systems that stretch the same feeling across months, across lawyers, across court dates and custody agreements and the performance of being fine on social media, while something old and biological tears quietly through everything underneath. Maybe the paperwork made it more civilized. Maybe it just made it last longer. Hi, I'm Marin Still, And now, you can never unknow this.